Live from the Vatican, I'm Mark Lowen. This is BBC News. Britain's King Charles and Queen Camilla have arrived here at the Vatican to spend a historic day with Pope Leo. For the first time in almost 500 years, a British monarch will pray publicly with the Pope in the Sistine Chapel. These are the live pictures of the glorious 15th century chapel under the frescoes of Michelangelo, where that historic moment will take place. We'll have the latest. Hello and a very warm welcome to BBC News. I'm Mark Lowen. We are live here on St Peter's Square, where history is about to be made as the first British monarch will pray together with a Catholic Pope since the 16th century, since 1534 in fact, when Henry VIII broke with Rome, created the Church of England, set England on path to Protestantism, and to 5 centuries in which two branches of the Catholic Church often had so much mistrust and so much tension between them. In recent decades, there has been growing warmth and unity between the Church of England and the Catholic Church, but today will be a historic moment because King Charles III and Queen Camilla are to pray beside Pope Leo XIV here inside the Sistine Chapel. These are the live pictures from inside the Vatican as they gear up for this historic moment. The King and Queen arrived here a little earlier in the morning. We saw their car sweep past us on St Peter's Square bearing the royal standard before going inside the Vatican for a private meeting between the King and the Pope, the first time that King Charles has met Leo XIV since his election as pontiff in May. And then those talks, now we understand, are coming to an end. There will be talks with the Vatican #2, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin. The Queen will tour the Pauline Chapel, which has other Michelangelo frescoes, and then they will go here into the Sistine Chapel, where you can see those gorgeous frescoes, which will provide the backdrop for this historic moment. Let us bring in our first guest this morning. We have got with us Catherine Pepinster, a historian, commentator and writer, former editor of the Catholic publication The Tablet. Catherine, very good to have you with us again as we watch these live pictures from inside the Vatican. The cardinals there with their red hats, absolutely keen to not to miss this hugely important occasion. Just lay out its significance for us.
Yes, and interestingly, I can see just in the images now to the far left of your screen, Cardinal Vincent Nichols from the Diocese of Westminster here in the UK. I've also spotted prominent Anglicans who work in Rome there. There's also a chair I noticed for our Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, who will be giving a reading at this service as well. And the fact that the Foreign Secretary is giving the reading, I think, is a sign that this is both a visit full of religious significance, but also diplomatic significance for the UK as it engages with the highly influential Vatican. But all eyes today will be on the King and Pope Leo as they pray in what I think is fair to describe the Sistine Chapel as really the very heart of the Roman Catholic Church, because, of course, it was here in the chapel that cardinals like Cardinal Nichols gathered earlier this year and elected Pope Leo as the next leader of the Roman Catholic Church. The then Cardinal Robert Prevost became Pope Leo XIV. And if anybody needs to feel the hand of history upon their shoulder and the burden of what they do, I think being before Michelangelo's Last Judgment really set you in your context. And that, of course, is what is happening. Now we're seeing images of the choir, and the choir today will be a combination of both choirs from Britain, royal choirs, and the Sistine Chapel Choir. There are members of the choir from the Chapel Royal at St James's Palace, and also choristers from St George's Chapel, Windsor, where the King's late mother and indeed his father are interred. A great way of showing an attempt at greater unity between the two faiths, having the Sistine Chapel Choir sing with the members of those royal choirs who've joined them in Rome from the UK today. This
Yes,
whole thing created with such significance.
Absolutely. I was going to say the Sistine Chapel Choir, one of the oldest choirs in the world. It's actually existed for 1,500 years and, of course, performs during papal celebrations at St. Peter's and in concerts all over the world. So symbolic that it should sing, obviously, beside the royal choirs as well, as we wait for the King and Queen to come into the Sistine Chapel. I've been inside there on a few occasions, and I remember the first time I was in there, it was to see the tapestries of Raphael being hung on the walls of the Sistine Chapel, where originally they were intended to hang, but they were brought back from a different storage area for a special exhibition. It was incredible to be in there, watching the restoration of the ceiling and these chapels being unfurled. It is, of course, an extremely magical place, and as you were saying, Catherine, the place where the cardinals believe they get the wisdom of the Holy Spirit to guide them in deciding who should lead the Catholic Church. And in May, it was decided that for the first time in its history, the Pope, in the Catholic Church's history, that the Pope would be from the United States or from North America. We understand this morning King Charles has had a meeting with Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State, the number 2 in effect at the Vatican. The Queen has had a tour of the Pauline Chapel with other frescoes by Michelangelo. We understand that the King and the Pope will have discussed issues that are close to their heart, political issues on climate change and environment, which we understand will also be at the heart of the Sistine Chapel service.
Yes, that's right. One of the themes of this service is care of creation. It was a major theme of the pontificate of Pope Francis. This state visit was supposed to take place earlier in the year, but of course Pope Francis became very seriously ill, and the Queen and the King did visit Rome for a private meeting with Pope Francis not that long before he died. But the state visit was then rescheduled, and so far Pope Leo has indicated that he's very much following in his predecessor's footsteps with a great interest in the environment as well. On the image on the screen at the moment, the man on the left, I believe, is the director of the Anglican Centre in Rome, Anthony Ball, and they will have been closely involved in dialogue and enabling a visit such as this to take place. And the Anglican Centre in Rome has existed in Rome for almost 60 years now. It became a major institution in Rome after the very first efforts at much friendlier relations between the Vatican and the Church of England, when Michael Ramsey went to Rome and saw Pope Paul VI. And at a meeting of the service they had in St. Paul's outside the walls, the church that the King will go to later, the Pope took off his ring and gave it to Michael Ramsey as a gesture of greater friendship between the two churches, which caused Michael Ramsey to become very tearful. It was such a great moment. And that ring has been kept. And every Archbishop of Canterbury since has always worn that ring when they visit Rome.
Fascinating. We continue to watch those live pictures from the most famous chapel in the world, from the Sistine Chapel, as all the clergy from the two different churches, the two different wings of Christianity, or two of the different wings of Christianity, sit together. And we understand that when King Charles and Queen Camilla arrive, they will enter the Sistine Chapel and take their seats, followed by Pope Leo and the Archbishop of York. Just explain to us, Catherine, the importance of and why the Archbishop of York is there, representing the Church of England.
Yes,
Actually,
Stephen.
Before we start that, let's look at this first photo that has just been released to us by the Vatican. You can see there that meeting, the handshake between King Charles and Pope Leo XIV. Their first meeting between two heads of state, of course, because the Pope is also the head of state of the Vatican, the smallest independent state in the world, and also two spiritual leaders, if you like, even though the king is not the spiritual leader of the Church of England, he is the supreme governor of the Church of England. He has that title, and of course Leo XIV is the leader of the Catholic faith. So that was the meeting there that they had inside the Apostolic Palace. Just explain to us why the Archbishop of York is there.
Yes, but just really quickly, I think it's significant. We shouldn't underestimate the fact that Pope Leo is Anglophone. So they will. I think the conversation will be much more fluid, much more fluent between two people speaking their native tongue, rather than needing translators. I think that's an important thing that's happening here. But to go back to the Archbishop of York, the Archbishop of York is the second most senior cleric in the Church of England, Stephen Cottrell, and he has been helping to effectively run the Church of England since Justin Welby stood down as Archbishop of Canterbury. Sarah Mullally, Archbishop of Canterbury elect, has not been officially installed yet as Archbishop of Canterbury, so that is why Stephen Cottrell is there. He's also a very significant figure in the Church of England.
Yes, as we just try to see who it is who's coming into the Sistine Chapel now, and it doesn't look as though it's the King and Queen yet. You mentioned Sarah Mullally there. Catherine. Just before we get to that, let's just remind ourselves of this moment that has just been released to us by photograph of the first meeting between King Charles and Pope Leo XIV. That historic meeting that started about an hour or so ago inside the Apostolic Palace. This photo has just been released. Let us go back to those live pictures from the Sistine Chapel, because I understand that we can see already King Charles beginning to make his way inside the Sistine Chapel. We can see there.
Yes, that looks as if he's being accompanied by Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who you mentioned earlier, the Secretary of State, effectively number 2 in the Vatican. I think I'm right in saying that Cardinal Parolin attended King Charles's coronation in 2023.
Yes, indeed. And the king had a meeting with Pietro Parolin, who was actually one of the contenders for, or unofficial contenders, let's say, for Pope, one of those who was considered papabili after the death of Pope Francis, when we were here on St. Peter's Square with our pages of notes on all the potential future popes. Pietro Parolin, an Italian, was high up on our list of the person who would have been chosen, but we understand from various different briefing, we will never know definitively, but that even though he received quite a lot of votes in the first round, in the end he was pipped at the post by Robert Prevost, the American, who in the end was of course chosen as Pope Leo XIV. Let us just see there, walking into the Sistine Chapel, we can see there King Charles, Queen Camilla, and indeed Cardinal Parolin. walking into the Sistine Chapel at the start of this service. There is the first, the anteroom, if you like, as they then walk through into the main chamber of the Sistine Chapel, and all around the glorious frescoes of Michelangelo. They will take their seats, and then and then Pope Leo will come in after.
Yes, indeed.
And
people will notice that Queen
Catherine,
Camilla is dressed
yes.
in black, which is conventional for non-Catholic queens. Catholic queens wear white. It's yet another little bit of Vatican protocol.
Yes, indeed. And after they come in, the Chapel Royal and the St George choirs will sing, and the choir of the Sistine Chapel will also sing 2 psalms together, and the order of service will begin. An ecumenical service which will include an introduction by Pope Leo and the Archbishop of York, and reading from the letter to the Romans by the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper. And there the many frescoes, the most famous of which, of course, were Michelangelo's Last Judgment. The Sistine Chapel taking its name from Pope Sixtus IV, who had the old Cappella Magna, as it was once called, restored towards the end of the 15th century. The chapel's walls decorated and featuring stories of Moses and Christ and portraits of popes. And it was then between 1508 and 1512 that Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, before being commissioned a little later in 1533 to paint the Last Judgment on the altar wall, which is where the cardinals, you can see some of them there with their red zucchetti, as they're known, the red skull caps. They are the ones who, when the conclave happens, go up towards that fresco of the Last Judgment, and they drop their voting paper into a box to decide who will be the next pope. They did this, of course, in May, and on the second day of voting, we got that white smoke, and we realised that the Catholic Church had its first American pope. Catherine,
it was a moment.
Not only a hugely symbolic.
It was
Sorry,
a moment.
I was just going to say, not just a huge moment of symbolism, but also the setting is so symbolic.
Yes, it was an interesting conclave as well, in that there were several English cardinal electors, very unusual. There was Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Cardinal Timothy Radcliffe, and another cardinal who we saw on our screens just a moment ago, Cardinal Arthur Roach from the United Kingdom, who now holds an office within the Vatican departments. So yes, a historic election in that sense as well. So there were so many English votes.
Indeed, and it was also the most geographically diverse conclave in history, because so many of the cardinals were elected by the late Pope Francis from the extremities, really, of the Catholic Church. There were, for the first time, cardinals from places like Sudan. We think now, yes, here comes Pope Leo. Pope Leo XIV coming in, following the King and Queen's entrance.
And beside him is Archbishop Stephen Cottrell.
Yes. And Catherine, Pope Leo XIV, to some extent reverting back to a more traditional format of the papacy and wearing some of the accoutrements that his predecessor Francis had shunned.
Yes, that's right. And also he's living in the Apostolic Palace, which Pope Francis did not do either. He didn't want to live there. He lived in effectively rather like a guest house called the Casa Santa Marta. But Pope Leo has asked for members of his religious order the Augustinians, to also live with him, so that he's living in a religious community within the palace. The fact that he's living in the palace, and that also he's wearing some of the more traditional garb of the pontiff, did make some people think he was going to be perhaps a more conservative pope. But some of the things that he's been saying recently have indicated that he's following more in Pope Francis' footsteps, with his focus on poverty, his sympathy for migrants, his focus on climate change. So continuity there, when some people thought there might be a change of direction.
Yeah, and of course he had a lot of time in his missionary career in Peru, working with impoverished communities there, and that, I'm sure, will have shaped his social ideals and principles. So, as you say, Catherine, very much kind of encouraging him to focus on that, in that respect, on poverty and on helping the migrants and the poor, possibly putting him at odds with the American administration of Donald Trump. So a difficult balancing act. Let's just take a listen.
And indeed with J.D. Vance, he's a Catholic. Yeah.
And Queen Camilla.
Oh God,
Indeed,
make
yeah.
speed
In front
to
of the
save
altar in the
us.
Sistine Chapel, we begin the midday prayer.
O God, make speed to save us.
You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Well, as we listened there to the first singing by the Chapel Royal and St George's choirs, they're singing If Ye Love Me by Thomas Tallis. And already with King Charles having been possibly praying silently there, this the beginning of this highly important ecumenical service that is just so symbolic. The first time in 500 years that a British monarch and a Catholic Pope are praying together, and prayer also often such a private moment. It is very rare for the king to be filmed in prayer, let alone praying with a pope in this historic moment. Catherine, that in itself is unusual and is momentous.
Yes, I think it's entirely appropriate to use the word momentous, and it's a great idea that to use the great choral traditions of both the Vatican and the Church of England to express these efforts at further unity between the two denominations. We've seen papal encounters with Anglican music before, because in 2010 Pope Benedict XVI, on his visit to the United Kingdom, attended evensong at Westminster Abbey, and he was so struck by the quality of this Anglican music that he took away with him CDs of the Westminster Abbey Choir to be able to listen to them again when he got home to Rome.
The Sistine Chapel, one of the choirs singing, one of the oldest choirs in the world, existing for 1,500
and now
years.
We hear Psalm 8, sung in Latin, and in English it's "How excellent is thy name in all the world."
The Sistine Chapel Choir, comprising 20 permanent adult singers and about 35 boy singers known as pueri cantores, and singing alongside two royal choirs, the choir of His Majesty's Chapel Royal and the choir of St George's Chapel as well. The Chapel Royal Choir, of course, based at St James's Palace. And the two choirs' duties, usually they sing the regular services in the monarch's chapels and attend the monarch at services and other events elsewhere, but today an added importance and prestige to their work as they sing in front of the leader of the Catholic faith and the supreme governor of the Church of England. A reminder that this is not, of course, Charles's first visit to the Vatican. He, as Prince of Wales, visited the Holy See 5 times, starting in 1985. And his mother, as Queen Elizabeth II, came for a state visit in the year 2000. But we understand back then that her desire to pray together with the then Pope John Paul II, well, those plans were dropped over concerns that would upset factions within the Church of England. And Elizabeth II was indeed the first monarch to make an official visit to the Holy See since the Reformation back in the 16th century. That came in 1961. And Catherine Pepinster, theological historian and commentator, still with us. Catherine, worth also just a quick word on how diplomatic relations between the United Kingdom and the Holy See were broken off for so long and were actually only restored in 1914. So this is recent history framed by ancient history.
Yes, that's right. I think it's fair to say that the diplomatic relationship between England and the Catholic Church was an ancient one. It used to have diplomats on both sides and both places before the Reformation, but that all came to an end with the Reformation, with the breakaway from Rome, and it's taken hundreds of years to not only restore diplomatic relations, but to restore the place of Catholics in British society. In 1829, almost 200 years ago, there was an Act of Parliament, the Catholic Emancipation Act, which enabled Catholics to hold public office again. Bit by bit, they've reached highest offices in the United Kingdom,
Here is Psalm
and then
64,
all the while
which in English says,
efforts
"Thou,
to
O God, art praised in Zion."
encourage diplomatic relations.
Yes, indeed, and just a reminder for some of our audiences who may not know Rome, that around Rome you see British embassies to Italy, or sorry, you see embassies to Italy, but you also see embassies to the Holy See. So the Vatican, as the smallest recognised state in the world, maintains diplomatic relations with so many countries, given the importance of the Holy See's work in social issues, also in issues of trying to bring warring states together. Barack Obama famously worked with Pope Francis, the late Pope Francis, to try to bring Cuba and the United States closer together. The late Pope Francis worked a lot on peace in South Sudan, for example. And now we have an American Pope in Leo XIV, whose ideals are likely to contrast with those of the Trump administration, and trying to tread a delicate diplomatic line, if you like, between his nationality, between being an American, but also needing to speak to and have close relations with leaders from across the world, not least Donald Trump.
Well, I think,
will be,
Mark,
I think, very keen to get to know Pope Leo quickly.
I think, Mark, it's interesting you mentioned South Sudan, and I think I'm right in saying that Pope Francis went to South Sudan with Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. It was a joint effort at trying to help them achieve peace. So diplomacy and faith do overlap. But going back to your point about the different embassies around town in Rome, there's now around 183 countries that have diplomatic relations with what's called the Holy See. That's almost all countries in the world now who have that relationship, and the Vatican has a permanent observer at the United Nations as well.